You are looking at the sentencing document for the woman at the center of the Trump-Epstein files nightmare, the cover-up, the presidential child abuse scandal. Do I sound angry? It's because I am. I'm Gloria Moraga. This is the Political Woman podcast, and please take a moment and subscribe to my channel and watch my content here and there, and certainly not everywhere. This is a convicted child abuser, child trafficker, Ghislaine Maxwell. She's a former friend of Donald Trump's and the girlfriend of one of Trump's friends. Former girlfriend, child rapist with Jeffrey Epstein. This is from a Department of Justice press release on Maxwell in June 2022. Damian Williams, the United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York, announced that Ghislaine Maxwell was sentenced today in Manhattan federal court to 240 months in prison for the role in a scheme to sexually exploit and abuse multiple minor girls with Jeffrey Epstein over the course of a decade.
A unanimous jury has found Ghislaine Maxwell guilty of one of the worst crimes imaginable, facilitating and participating in the sexual abuse of children, crimes that she committed with her longtime partner and co-conspirator, Jeffrey Epstein. The road to justice has been far too long, but today, justice has been done.
Maxwell was found guilty in December 2021 following a 1-month trial. Here are her crimes. I think this is important that we discuss this and we talk about this. And here is a list of her crimes. 1, conspiracy to entice minors to travel or engage in illegal sex acts. 2, conspiracy to transport minors to participate in illegal sex acts. 3, transporting a minor to participate in illegal sex acts, sex trafficking conspiracy. And 4, sex trafficking of a minor. This is a quote from the prosecutor. Today's sentence holds Ghislaine Maxwell accountable for perpetrating heinous crimes against children. This sentence sends a strong message that no one is above law and it is never too late for justice. We again express our gratitude to Epstein and Maxwell's victims for their courage in coming forward and testifying at trial and sharing their stories. So that is some background. Of course, Damian Williams is no longer with the Department of Justice. He left last year, not long after Trump took over, or maybe shortly after, not sure. As have other people. The reason that I'm focusing on this, I'm focusing on something that sickens me, actually, that physically makes me physically ill to read about these crimes. But I'm doing it because this woman is a monster. This woman that Trump administration Justice Department people, his former lawyer, met with over 2 days. Did they meet with the victims, with the survivors of these two monsters? No. They met with a convicted child abuser, and then they moved her to a cushy prison where inmates are allowed to train puppies. This woman does not deserve to be around a puppy. Man. So I'm going to read some of the sentencing memorandum. Here it is. And here's a table of contents. So it has some background, which I've just given you. Then it's got the investigation. And then it goes into the charges, which lists the laws that Maxwell was found guilty of violating. But then here is what's interesting. These 6 points: the sexual abuse of Jane, the sexual abuse of Kate, the sexual abuse of Annie Farmer, the sexual abuse of Virginia Roberts, the sexual abuse of Carolyn, the sexual abuse of Melissa. And in this document, this sentencing memorandum, Damian Williams and the Department of Justice, they lay out why Maxwell should be given the sentence that she is given and why she needs to spend time in jail. This woman does not ever need to be released from prison. She should not be around our girls. And when I say our girls, I mean all young women. Yeah, I take that role. I take that role as an older woman. These are our cherished girls. So I'll skim over and read some of the document. Preliminary statement. Ghislaine Maxwell played an instrumental role in the horrific sexual abuse of multiple young teenage girls. As part of a disturbing agreement with Jeffrey Epstein, Maxwell identified, groomed, and abused multiple victims while she enjoyed a life of extraordinary luxury and privilege. In her wake, Maxwell left her victims permanently scarred with emotional and psychological injuries. The damage can never be undone, but it can be accounted for in crafting a just sentence for Maxwell's crimes. End quote. And I'm telling you now, rise up, people. I'm begging you. Don't let them pardon this woman. She's a monster. She should not be let out of jail. And this sentencing document, which I'm going to put on my website, I'm going to put it right in front, and you can just click on the document, and it'll take you to the PDF. If you have trouble reading PDF, just let me know, and I will make it available in whatever form you could download or read. So the government submits this memorandum in connection with the sentencing of Maxwell, and then it goes on this document to explain why should she be given, this 20-year sentence that she eventually gets. That now, look, what are they going to do? Are they going to let her go? What are they doing? They've already let her go to the puppy prison. This is from page 7 of the sentencing document, and I think it's important considering where we are right now. It's Section C, Summary of Proof at Trial. And here we go. On November 29, 2021, the defendant proceeded to trial on counts 1 through 6. On December 29, 2021, the jury returned a verdict of guilty on counts 1, 3, 5, 4, and 6. Now, I've already read those. And the proof at trial established that over the course of a decade, the defendant facilitated and participated in the sexual abuse of multiple young girls. From 1994 to 2004, the defendant, Maxwell, and Epstein worked together to identify girls, groom them, and then entice them to travel and transport them to Epstein's properties in New York, Florida, New Mexico, and elsewhere. The girls, some as young as 14 years old, were then sexually abused, often under the guise of a, quote, massage. Beginning in approximately 1991, Maxwell, who's named here as the defendant, had a close and intimate relationship with Epstein. The defendant was Epstein's girlfriend for many years, until in or about the early 2000s. After that point, the defendant, Maxwell, and Epstein remained close friends. For over a decade, the defendant traveled with Epstein, a multimillionaire, on his private planes and mingled with rich and famous people. As the defendant wrote in an essay, she and Epstein were a, quote, a couple who were, quote, rarely apart, quote, great partners, and the best of friends. The defendant enjoyed a life of extraordinary luxury with Epstein. The defendant, Maxwell, and Epstein spent time together in Epstein's various properties, including a mansion on the Upper East Side in Manhattan, his villa in Palm Beach, his ranch in New Mexico, his apartment in Paris, his private island in the U.S. Virgin Islands. During the time frame of the conspiracy, Maxwell received exceptional benefits from Epstein, beyond the lavish lifestyle that she enjoyed side by side with Epstein. Maxwell also received a townhouse that Epstein bought for her in New York City, and Epstein transferred a total of approximately $23 million to Maxwell during the time frame of the conspiracy, end quote. So not only for her part in grooming these children, of abusing these young girls, he was giving her money. He was paying her, but she was doing it willingly. In addition to her role as Epstein's girlfriend, the defendant also supervised Epstein's households and enjoyed a lifestyle of extraordinary wealth. The defendant relished her role as, quote, lady of the house. When the defendant took charge of Epstein's home, she imposed strict rules for the staff. For example, the defendant, Epstein, helped author and implement a household manual, which contained rules for operating the Palm Beach house to anticipate the needs of Mr. Epstein, Miss Maxwell, and their guests. Staff was directed to have 2 sizes of notepads marked Ghislaine Maxwell and Lady Ghislaine, in addition to Epstein's notepads. Then it goes on. Just the rest of it makes you want to throw up. And now she's been moved to a cushier prison with Trump lackeys floating the idea that she's going to get some sort of pardon. They're floating it. The nasty people, the nasty men who said they wanted to have the files released, who've now done a flip-flop, even that stupid woman who used to work for Fox, not a news station, she said, well, she might be a victim. She's no victim. And here's the proof in the sentencing memo. So this is page 8, and we're jumping to the sexual abuse of Jane. And this is at the bottom of page 8, and I'm going to say this. A warning. This is hard to listen to. Warning, this might trigger for some of you who have been abused. When I first read it, I actually felt physically ill because I think about my daughter, my grandchild, my nieces and nephews that I adore. Quote, sexual abuse of Jane. Every time I say the word defendant in this document, it's talking about Maxwell. So I'll say defendant and I'll say Maxwell, or I'll say defendant, but I mean Maxwell. The defendant Maxwell and Epstein met Jane when she was just 14 years old in the summer of 1994 at a summer camp for talented kids. Jane was particularly vulnerable as her father had just passed away, a fact that Maxwell and Epstein knew. And they knew that her family was struggling financially. Maxwell and Epstein cultivated a relationship with Jane, spending time with her at Epstein's Palm Beach home and taking her to the movies and on shopping outings. The defendant and Epstein gave Jane gifts, and Jane came to look up to Maxwell as an older sister figure. Maxwell and Epstein abused that relationship of trust in the worst possible way imaginable. They sexually abused Jane, starting when she was just 14 years old, and the sexual abuse continued for years. When Jane was still only 14 years old, the defendant, Maxwell and Epstein, instructed Jane to follow them to Epstein's bedroom, where Maxwell and Epstein fondled each other, casually giggling about it, while Epstein asked Jane to take off her top. While this was happening, quote, there were hands everywhere. Epstein began to masturbate, and the defendant, Maxwell, rubbed, kissed, and fondled Epstein. After this initial sexual interaction, Maxwell and Epstein continued to sexually abuse Jane. Maxwell and Epstein taught Jane how Epstein liked to be massaged, gave Jane instructions about touching Epstein's penis. When Jane was 14 years old, Maxwell tried to make Jane feel like this was very normal and, quote, not a big deal. Jane was repeatedly sexually abused by Epstein between the ages of 14 and 16. And Maxwell was frequently in the room when this happened. Over time, the abuse escalated, and Epstein used vibrators on Jane, masturbated, put his fingers in Jane's vagina, and asked Jane to straddle his face. Maxwell sometimes touched Jane during these incidents. In particular, Jane recalled that Maxwell touched her breasts. The sexual abuse was not limited to Palm Beach, Florida, as Jane traveled with Maxwell and Epstein to Epstein's townhouse in New York City and his ranch in New Mexico, where Jane was sexually abused during those trips. 2. The sexual abuse of Kate. Maxwell and Epstein's sexual abuse of Kate started in 1994, around the same time that Maxwell and Epstein started abusing Jane. After Kate, then 17 years old, told the defendant that she lived alone with her mother and that things were difficult at home, Maxwell introduced Kate to Epstein in London. The defendant delivered Kate to a naked Epstein in the defendant's own home for massages and told Kate to have a good time. So that's, I'm saying the defendant, but that's Maxwell. Maxwell told Kate to have a good time, quote, unquote. During these massages, Epstein initiated sexual contact with her, putting her hands on his penis and grabbing Kate's breasts and grabbing in between her legs. Kate traveled to meet both Maxwell and Epstein in Palm Beach, Little St. James, and New York City when she was between approximately 18 and 24 years old. Epstein initiated sexual activity with Kate every time she spent with him, from when she was 17 years old into her early 30s. Maxwell brought up sexual topics with Kate, ranging from talking about how sexually demanding Epstein was to asking if Kate knew of anyone to give Epstein a blowjob, to remarking that Epstein liked cute, young, pretty girls like Kate. When Kate was approximately 18 years old, Kate visited Epstein and Maxwell at Epstein's villa in Palm Beach. Maxwell had left a schoolgirl outfit for Kate in the guest room and told Kate she thought it would be fun for Kate to take Epstein his tea in that outfit. Man. Kate, alone with only Epstein and Maxwell in a place she had never previously visited, complied. Epstein raped Kate by engaging in forced intercourse with her. Later that day, Maxwell asked Kate if she had fun and told Kate that she was a, quote, good girl and, quote, one of Epstein's favorites. Epstein engaged in unwanted sexual activity with Kate multiple times during this trip. Gotta take a break. Gotta have some Diet Pepsi because this is bad. Say one thing right now. Everybody remember this, what they did to these young girls, and don't let Trump get away with pardoning this woman. She's a monster. 3, the sexual abuse of Annie Farmer. Maxwell also took steps to normalize sexual contact with Annie Farmer, who was then 16 years old. In the spring of 1996, Annie's mother, at Epstein's request, agreed to send Annie to Epstein's ranch in New Mexico for a retreat for a group of 20 to 25 students, both boys and girls, that were academically gifted to discuss college plans and international trips. I'll bet Annie did not want to go because Epstein had caressed and held Annie's hand and rubbed her foot and leg while they were watching a movie at a theater in New York in December 1995. Despite these misgivings, Annie felt more comfortable going to New Mexico once she understood that Maxwell, the defendant, a grown woman in a romantic relationship with Epstein, would be there with Annie. Yet, when Annie found herself alone at Epstein's ranch in New Mexico with just Epstein and Maxwell, she found that Maxwell, the defendant, was anything but a protector. Instead, Annie found that the purpose of the trip was to groom her for sexual abuse. During the New Mexico trip, the defendant took steps to normalize sexual contact under the ruse of massage. Maxwell asked Annie if she had ever had a professional massage and said she wanted Annie to have the experience and that she would be happy to give Annie a massage. This is grooming. After telling Annie to get undressed, Maxwell gave Annie a massage on a massage table while Annie was naked. During the massage, the defendant rubbed Annie's body and directed Annie to roll over so that Annie was lying on her back. After Annie complied and rolled on her back, Maxwell pulled the sheet down and exposed Annie's breasts. Then, while Annie was naked and isolated on a ranch in the middle of nowhere, the defendant, Maxwell, rubbed Annie's breasts. Annie testified that she wanted, quote, badly to get off the table and have this massage done. Maxwell sexually abused a teenage girl in an effort to groom her for further abuse. Following through on that plan on this same New Mexico trip, Epstein later got into Annie's bed, cuddled with her, pressed his body into her, and rubbed against her. But when Annie managed to extricate herself from the situation by running to the bathroom, thereby denying Epstein further sexual contact, the defendant, Maxwell, seemed very disinterested in Annie. So Annie got punished by Maxwell, the monster. Maybe instead of saying defendant or Maxwell, I should just say the monster. Sexual abuse of Virginia Roberts. Beginning in or about the summer of 2000, Maxwell and Epstein entered a new phase of their scheme to sexually abuse teenage girls. That summer, Maxwell recruited a 17-year-old girl named Virginia Roberts from the parking lot of Mar-a-Lago to provide Epstein with massages. Over the next several months, Virginia was paid to provide Epstein with sexualized massages at his Palm Beach residence in exchange for hundreds of dollars in cash for each massage. I'm going to throw up. Virginia also traveled with Epstein and Maxwell to various locations, including New York, the Virgin Islands, on Epstein's private plane. And, there were all kinds of other people going, and, they were taking videos of all these young girls. Virginia brought other teenage girls to Epstein's Palm Beach house. One of those girls was a 14-year-old named Carolyn, who Virginia introduced to Maxwell and Epstein at the Palm Beach villa in 2001. Thus began the pyramid scheme phase of the defendant, Maxwell and Epstein's abuse of teenage girls. 5. Sexual abuse of Carolyn. Carolyn visited Epstein's Palm Beach residence more than 100 times, during each of which she was sexually abused during paid sexualized massages. Carolyn met Maxwell the very first time she went to Epstein's house. She interacted with Maxwell multiple times thereafter. On Carolyn's first visit to the house, Maxwell greeted Virginia, who introduced Carolyn to the defendant. So see, they've got the other young girls bringing in other young girls. Maxwell told Virginia, "You can bring her upstairs and show her what to do." After which, Virginia showed Carolyn how to perform a sexual massage on Epstein. Carolyn performed over 100 paid sexualized massages for Epstein when she was between 14 and 18 years old. The vast majority involved the same course of abuse. At some point during each massage, Epstein rolled over and began masturbating himself. Epstein then directed Carolyn to touch his nipples, and he touched Carolyn's breasts and buttocks. On one occasion, Epstein attempted to touch Carolyn's vagina with a vibrator, but Carolyn pulled away, so he stopped. On 2 occasions, Epstein brought other females into the room with Carolyn, who engaged Carolyn in oral sex, and on one occasion, Epstein raped Carolyn by penetrating her vagina with his penis. Each massage ended with Epstein ejaculating. The defendant, Maxwell, personally scheduled Carolyn's massages for approximately the first year or two, when Carolyn was between the ages of 14 and 15 years old. This is the woman that they have sent to a softer, nicer prison. This is a woman who has secrets to tell and won't tell if she gets more favorable treatment, like being let free. Be aware, everybody. This is what's happening. These are our government dollars being spent for this sexual abuser to get better treatment. Back to the document, quote, "Indeed, Maxwell knew Carolyn's age and much of her background because she had multiple conversations with Carolyn about Carolyn's life. During these conversations, Carolyn revealed that she'd personally been sexually abused by a relative and that her parents were separated and that her mother struggled with addiction." And this is exactly the girls that they want. Pretty young girls who have trouble, who need help. Maxwell invited Carolyn to travel with Maxwell and Epstein, but Carolyn explained, "I'm only 14. She would not be able to go and get permission to travel. Carolyn was paid several $100s in $100 bills for each massage. Usually the money was laid out on the table or in the sink in the bathroom, and the defendant personally paid Carolyn after the massages. But here's a puppy you can play with now and train." The defendant saw Carolyn fully nude in the massage room on approximately 3 occasions. This happened when Carolyn was already undressed in preparation for the massage, but before Epstein had come into the room. One particular instance stands out in Carolyn's mind when Carolyn was 14 years old. She had set up the massage table and was fully nude when Maxwell walked into the massage room. Maxwell told Carolyn that she had a nice body and touched Carolyn's breasts. At some point, Epstein asked Carolyn if she had any young friends she could bring them in for massages. Carolyn ended up bringing multiple girls to massage Epstein, including multiple minors. When Carolyn brought girls to massage Epstein, both the girl and Carolyn would be paid hundreds of dollars in cash. During these massages, Epstein masturbated and touched Carolyn and her friends' breasts and buttocks. 6. We're finally almost finished. I'm Gloria Moraga, political woman. I'll take a minute to say that I'm reading from the sentencing document of the child abuser, Ghislaine Maxwell, who has been moved from a prison in Florida to a prison in Texas, from one prison to a nicer prison, to a prison where no sexual abusers have ever been housed, but they're doing it. And what's next? So this is the sentencing document that was prepared at the time Maxwell was sentenced for her crimes against multiple young children, young girls that were sexually abused and trafficked and moved over state lines for sexual activities. And this was written by this man, Damian Williams, who was the U.S. Attorney in New York, but has since quit the Department of Justice, and we all know why, because it's corrupt now. 6, sexual abuse of Melissa. One of the minor girls Carolyn brought to provide paid sexual massages to Epstein was named Melissa. Melissa was just 16 years old when she went with Carolyn to Epstein's Palm Beach residence. Melissa went to Epstein's residence to provide Epstein with massages on multiple occasions when she was under the age of 18. When Melissa and Carolyn went to the Palm Beach house, they remained in the home for about an hour and then returned with hundreds of dollars in cash. And this is from evidence, an entry entitled Melissa's Cell, Carolyn's Friend, as well as multiple entries with Carolyn's full name and an entry named Virginia. Parents were listed in the defendant, Maxwell's, and Epstein's black address book under the heading Massage Florida. Thus, as a direct result of the pyramid scheme that began with Virginia and continued with Carolyn, Melissa suffered multiple, repeated sexual abuse. That is the end of page 16. Know that this sentencing memorandum goes on for 55 pages. I've read the parts that were used as direct evidence against the monster, Maxwell, that sexually abused young girls in cahoots with Jeffrey Epstein. And why aren't they releasing the files so that we can prosecute some of the others that were involved in these schemes? And why on God's green earth did they move the monster Maxwell from one prison to another, to a clubby type prison in Texas? Why? And where are the files? And why is Congress, who's in cahoots with corrupt Trump DOJ, subpoenaing only Democrats and not some of these Republicans that we know knew about this and were involved? Why? Why did we have 1,000 FBI agents going through the Epstein files and crossing out or marking Donald Trump's name? What's that about? If there's nothing to hide, if he didn't do anything wrong, then let's see it. I'm Gloria Moraga, political woman. Please subscribe. Gear up, people. I know it seems like a long time away, but we've got to vote next year. And we've got to make noise so that they don't pardon this monster that ruined the lives of many, not just these 6 young women. Please subscribe. Please follow me. I'm Gloria Moraga. Be safe.